What's happening? Welcome to the Matt Bernier Show. My name is Matt Bernier. You can follow me on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. This is the preview edition, but really it's sort of, let's call it part one of a four-part pod. They're going to come out in the sort of standard days that I normally put things out. So Thursday for the preview, Monday for the recap. But again, these four pods coming up, they're going to be a look at the top 20 as far as the leaderboard is concerned for the Kentucky Derby. I feel like timing-wise, this is going to work out very well, where we'll go through horses 1 through 5 here in this pod. In Monday's pod, we'll come back and look at 6 through 10. Next week's preview, which would come out on Thursday, will be 11 through 15, and then the following Monday will be 16 through 20. If things change, if horses defect between now and then, we can always go back and add them in wherever we see fit. But for now, I feel like this is really good timing-wise, because then once that final pod, horses 16 through 20 on the leaderboard, once that one is done, that following Thursday, that preview pod will be talking about the Kentucky Oaks and the Kentucky Derby, because we will be at that point on the calendar. So this is how we're going to go for the next four pods. Be prepared. It's not going to be a standard preview and a standard recap. There will be no recap as far as going over the stakes recaps and things like that are concerned for these next 2 weeks. These next four pods are all going to be devoted to the top 20 as far as the Kentucky Derby points leaderboard is concerned. And we'll take them right in order, 1 through 20. So this one here today, we're going to kick things off with 1 through 5. However you get this podcast, thanks for listening. You've got YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, video.drf.com, as well as Spotify. Wherever you're listening, please subscribe, rate, and review. Make sure your notifications are on so you're ready to go. So you make sure that you get everything that we have at DRFTV and everything that is produced for you. Questions, comments, concerns, you can either leave them beneath the video player on YouTube or directly to me on Twitter at Bernier_Matt. The way we'll do this, we'll take a look at a couple of replays for each one of these horses. I'll show you their past performances. I will talk about a little bit about their time form ratings and things like that, but I want to keep them relatively tight, but go in depth enough where we can kind of make some, use some things to sort of form an opinion on. Whether you agree, disagree, whatever it may be, this is hopefully going to be kind of an evergreen piece leading into the Derby where you can always go back and take a look at some certain things. So let's kick things off. We'll start off with number 1, the horse with the most points leading into the Kentucky Derby. That's Tacitus. Let's begin by looking at the top point earner as far as Derby qualifying points are concerned here in 2019. That's Tacitus for Bill Mott. This is a nice horse. You can see just royally bred. He is by Tappet out of the champion mare Close Hatches. He was really impressive as a 2-year-old. He had only won one of his 2 lifetime starts, but there was reason to think, not just from a pedigree standpoint, but the way that he moved, that there was some upside here. I said leading into the Tampa Bay Derby when I previewed that race here, and you can find that pod going way back into the archives, that the move that he made rounding the far turn in both his career debut at Belmont as well as his run at Aqueduct, while I thought he was still green, a bit of an uncommon move for a 2-year-old at that point. So clearly he was showing that there might be some reason to believe that there was bigger and better things still to come for him. Still, coming off of such a long layoff, first start against winners, shipping out of New York, and I know he was based down in South Florida, but he was racing outside of New York for the first time, going 2 turns for the first time, a lot of things being thrown at Tacitus in his seasonal debut. We're going to go back to the Tampa Bay Derby. Now keep in mind, this is a day that Timeform US had the main track color-coded slightly red, or the light red, meaning slightly speed-friendly. You're going to see back here, this horse with the cursor, that is Tacitus. He's the big gray. He's under an all-out drive, so it's not a visually impressive sort of situation here. It looks like he might be in some deep water, but given the potential with the track playing against him, maybe you want to be a little bit kind. Although on the flip side, look at these fractions. For the opening quarter, 22, just a shade under 22 and 4, 45 and 4 for a half mile. We'll let the tape run. And the thing for me, I've spoken about the Tampa Bay Derby as a whole. It's difficult for me to really sit here and say I think this was a great race, but I think there are races where the top 2 or 3 finishers can run well while the rest of the field can be subpar at best. You're going to see that purple cap right now down on the inside. That's Tacitus weaving his way through. Win is on the far outside. You've got a couple other horses. Outshine for Pletcher and the black cap between horses. There are some decent enough horses. I just don't know that any of them are superstars outside of Tacitus. Now, I've also said, and don't get me wrong, I like win. I've made that clear. But there is that part of me that says he needs to really prove that he belongs in this upper echelon as far as Derby contenders are concerned. But that was a good starting off point for Tacitus. Still a little bit on the green side. Asked pretty far from home, needed to really get into it. You figured he would need one more race before. They weren't going to just throw him into the Derby on that. One, because he might need more points. But two, he's the kind of horse that probably needed a little bit more seasoning. So fast forward a month, we ship up to Ozone Park. We ship up to Aqueduct. Here we are. We're going to take this race in a couple of different pieces because this is the early portion. And this is one of the things that I really like about Tacitus. And then we'll pick it up a little bit farther on. You see Tacitus here in the Juddmonte Silks between horses. It's about to be bumper cars. Okay, they're about to be absolutely slamming and banging off of one another. We'll run that back just because of the old computer. Here we go. Bouncing off of one another. A little bit uncomfortable for Jose Ortiz there for a moment. Now you're also going to see going into this first turn, Tacitus is floated very wide in between horses. There's contact. It's a lot of things going against this horse. We're going to fast forward here a little bit further, rounding the far turn. This is when you start to look at him and say, okay, he's finally hitting his stride. The issue early on, that didn't really sort of deter him at all. He wings out here, and he comes with this big bid, and he runs down a nice horse and Tax. Now, he's going to lean in down the lane, but I don't want to hold that against him. I think he overcame a lot, and usually we talk about the Derby. It's not going to be the cleanest situation. Very unlikely anyway. There's going to be some sort of adversity thrown at some of these horses. And I think there's some decent horses running in this race. I do like Tax. I think he's very honest. You see High Cal coming from the back of the pack. But what Tacitus had to deal with early on, coupled with the way that he came with that big, long, sustained bid, coupled with the fact that that was only his fourth lifetime start, second off the bench, and now he has shown that he can win basically, I don't want to say all over, but he's won at two different racetracks. He has 2 wins at Aqueduct, and he's got 1 at Tampa Bay. They're very different, it would seem, seemingly surface type. Some horses handle Tampa Bay down, some of them don't. Some horses like Aqueduct a little more than other tracks in New York. But it's just one of those things to me now, distance-wise, it doesn't feel like that's an issue. He's battle-tested. I like that he can be bounced around and he's not going to shut it down or sort of shy away from going on with it. And he's got top-flight connections. Juddmonte, Bill Mott, Jose Ortiz. There's not really a lot to knock about Tacitus. Price-wise, he's going to be one of the favorites in here, but I have a funny feeling the horse we'll talk about next is going to be the favorite come post time. Tacitus, he's a very exciting prospect, not just for the Derby, but going forward because of his pedigree, because of his connections, and because of what he's accomplished in a very short amount of time. He earned the most qualifying points leading into the Kentucky Derby. We'll find out if that continues on, and he can add to sort of his accolades at this point. He's a dual Grade 1 winner. He's going to look to get that Grade 1. He's a dual Grade 2 winner. He's going to look to get that Grade 1 the first Saturday in May in the Kentucky Derby. The number 1 horse as far as points are concerned, Tacitus. You have to view him as a major player for the Kentucky Derby. Number 2 on the Derby qualifying points list was Omaha Beach for Richard Mandella. Mike Smith is going to be riding this horse in the Kentucky Derby. Probably not a giant surprise, but there was still a decision to be made, whether it would be Omaha Beach or Roadster. The beautiful thing about this horse is pretty straightforward. All right, you look at the pedigree, wants to run all day at face value. You see that they began him on grass, understandably so. And I began to look at him probably in a little bit of an uncharitable way, saying, boy, you got to win some of these races. But you know what? You come back and you look. Flying Scotsman's a nice horse. Nolo Contesto's a nice horse. But the thing that you really need to keep an eye on is just look at these incremental moves forward in each and every start. He has not taken one backward step as far as the buyers are concerned. He continues to improve. Now, the real acid test was going to be to find out what would happen over a fast main track, going 2 turns against winners for the first time in the Grade 2 Rebel. He had this giant blowout victory here, going 7/8 of a mile on a sloppy sealed track. Well, that's all well and good. Did he just take to the wet track? Was it 1 turn? What was the situation? They ship him out to Oaklawn, and here we are. You're taking on one of the big boys. This is the 2-year-old champion here on the outside and game winner. And really, this is a very, very comfortable effort from Omaha Beach. He never looks like he's really in any kind of danger. Meanwhile, game winner on the outside, say what you will. This was his first start off the layoff. And keep in mind, with the issues out in Southern California, this was not the first expected goal for game winner. And the same can be said about Improbable. They were supposed to be running the week prior out at Santa Anita. Well, when they didn't run, they had to ship here. But look at how comfortably Omaha Beach is doing this. Meanwhile, Joel Rosario's all over game winner. And it's going to come down to a head. A bob one way or the other, and ultimately it's a nose victory for Omaha Beach over game winner. But the bigger point is this at least proved that a horse like Omaha Beach is on par with some of the better 3-year-olds of his generation. He moved up to a 96 buyer. The time form ratings were very solid as well. And then when you got to the Arkansas Derby, you knew, okay, now you already took down one Baffert. Now you got to deal with the other one, Improbable, or one of the other ones anyway. The sloppy sealed track, though, not going to be an issue for him. And again, from a pedigree standpoint, in the way that he moves, you wouldn't think the additional ground would be a problem. Well, sure enough, here we go. This is last weekend. He's out on the front end right now. Improbable starting to wind up on the far outside. Now keep in mind, Improbable, he did act up in the starting gate. He was unable to get out to the outside. Many people believe the outside is where you wanted to be at Oaklawn on this day. But still, look at how confident Mike Smith is aboard this horse. Meanwhile, Jose Ortiz is all over Improbable. And when it looks like he's going to come up and challenge Omaha Beach just extends on him. And really, again, all around a very impressive effort from this horse. He kind of checks all the boxes right now, especially when you consider how horses over the past handful of years have won the Kentucky Derby, what their running style has been. Omaha Beach, now the piece I didn't show was early on, he has this big sort of brush coming out of the first turn. He'll brush right up to the lead and go on with it, but he doesn't do it in sort of a headstrong, crazy way. He does it very kindly, very relaxed. Once he gets out there, he finds his rhythm and he goes on with it. The important piece there is when you compare that to how the Kentucky Derby has been won and run over the past 5, 6, 7 years, for the most part, even with fast paces, horses that have the ability to be forwardly placed, kind of work out their own trip, goes a long way. Look at American Pharoah, look at Justify, California Chrome, just to name a few, Nyquist. I mean, we've got a number of these horses that this is sort of the MO. And if you have a horse like Omaha Beach, where you're not afraid of the distance, he has the ability to get into the run. And yes, Richard Mandela has not won a Kentucky Derby yet, but guess what? He's won everything else there is to win. So I'm not too concerned about the connections here. Mike Smith chooses this horse over Roadster. You have a lot to like about Omaha Beach. Now, the sort of flip side is he's done this with circumstances, perhaps, as far as the Baffert runners are concerned. Game winner off the layoff, Improbable with his antics early on. But that's, you can't take that away from Omaha Beach. You can only beat who is thrown out to you. And at this point, Omaha Beach has done nothing wrong as far as his runs against graded stakes caliber company is concerned. And he continues to improve. That's the important piece. If you get another forward move the first Saturday in May, he's going to be an absolute handful in here. You may be looking at the Kentucky Derby favorite. I don't think you'll be looking at anything in the 2-1, 5-2 range, but you might be looking at a horse that goes off at 7-2 as your favorite come post time, maybe even in that 4-1 range. He deserves to be one of, if not the outright favorite. Omaha Beach, he's done a lot of good things in a short amount of time. It looks like he's going to be one of the main players in the Derby here in a few weeks. Number 3 on the Derby qualifying points list this year was Vakama for George Weaver. You see this pedigree by Candy Ride out of a Speightstown mare named Mona de Mama. Based on the mom side of things, you would think shorter, perhaps one turn. I still have this sort of nagging suspicion that one turn may still be where he flourishes and is at his absolute best. But he did kind of squash those concerns. I don't want to say squash them, but he at least, he quieted those. He softened those concerns a little bit, most recently in the Bluegrass. Before we take a look at the tape, look at what he's done in 4 lifetime starts. He really hasn't done anything wrong. He's earned 87 buyers or better in all 4 starts, 3 times 90 plus, 2 times 94 or greater. This is a horse that continues to just prove that he's a solid, talented racehorse. Now, down the road, is he going to be a mile and an eighth, mile and a quarter type, or is he going to be a 7/8 one-turn miler? Who knows? It's probably too early to tell. I still have some suspicions that it might end up being better going shorter, that he may really flourish and be at his best going a one-turn configuration. We're going to go back to the Toyota Bluegrass right now down at Keeneland. He's forwardly placed. Look at these fractions, 47, 23, and 1 for the opening quarter. He's forward. He's outside in the clear. He's going to go on with this. He goes and takes over from some like it Hop Brown. You've got Signalman coming on. Now, I like win-win-win, and I think he would have made this a heck of a lot closer had he not had that little spot of trouble right there. But take a look at this. Vakama at this point is in full flight. I hate his action. I mean, I'm not going to mince words here. He's not the prettiest thing I've ever seen, moving anyway. But at the same time, he's finishing here. Now, is it him finishing, or is it a bit of an optical illusion where he's not slowing down nearly as much as everyone else is, with the exception of Win-Win-Win, who is actually finishing, and you can see he's gobbling up ground late. I think it's probably somewhere in the middle. The truth lies somewhere between the two. But this was a good effort from Vakama, and he's the kind of horse that you're going to get a good price on, because I think there's going to be a number of people like myself that are still a little bit dubious about ultimately how far he wants to go. With his running style now, if you believe he's going to be that close to the pace, Does that work against a horse that perhaps does have distance limitations, or he's not as well suited for the distance, the additional eighth of a mile, as some of his other sort of contemporaries? I hope that makes sense. Him being closer to a potentially faster pace, I think that could work against a horse that may have distance limitations as opposed to one of these other ones that seems like they want to run on all day, like an Omaha Beach, where distance doesn't look like it's going to be an issue for him. I still think Vakama is a really talented horse. Again, he is not the prettiest mover you've ever seen on the track, but he's just a proper blue-collar racehorse through and through. I still think he's going to be better shorter when it's all said and done, but he deserves and has earned his opportunity to run in a race like the Kentucky Derby. He has earned the points. He's won big races. And something to keep in mind about him and all these other horses, particularly in the top 5, since this point system has been implemented. I've said it a million times. I'm going to sound like a broken record. If you have not won one of the final prep races across the country, you have not been one of the main players as far as a win contender is concerned for the Kentucky Derby. All of the winners of the Derby, of the Kentucky Derby, had won one of those final major preps across the country. Vakama checks that box as well. He's got a good trainer in George Weaver. We'll find out what we get from a running style standpoint and how far he wants to go when it's all said and done. But for right now, Vakama is going to be an interesting kind of, let's say, under the radar sort of horse. If you like this horse, you're probably going to get double digits. I'd imagine somewhere even in that 12-1 range, because there are going to be a number of doubters. But what he's done on the racetrack so far, he just proves. It continues to show that he's a solid racehorse through and through. We'll find out in time, but for right now, he might be a sneaky little value play here if you like him in the Kentucky Derby. Number 4 on the qualifying points list for the Kentucky Derby in 2019, Paluska Parfait for Brendan Walsh. I think Brendan Walsh is a great trainer, underrated. I think a lot of the stock that he throws out there and a lot of the horses that he just brings along, I just think he does a very, very good job, and I think this is a deserved entrant in here. Now, you win a big race, you deserve to get in here. Do I necessarily look at Paluska Parfait and say, you know what, I think he's going to be a major threat in the Derby? Frankly, no. But he's the kind of horse to me that if you're playing any of the larger wagers, if you're playing trifectas and superfectas, I would want to use him underneath because this distance, you take a look at the pedigrees by point of entry out of an Awesome Again mare, and the way that he finished in the UAE Derby makes me think that the distance isn't going to be an issue for him. The question now is he really this good? Is he good enough to run with the Roadsters, the Tacituses, the Omaha Beaches, the Game Winners? Is he good enough to run with those types? Because let's be honest. His Lecomte, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt because it was off the layoff and he had a little bit of an issue. You can see in the short comment over here, stumbled at the start. He was just very slowly away. The Risen Star was a disaster. He did no running whatsoever, and that one really soured me. I looked at him and said, you know what, I don't know. He shows up with blinkers over here in Dubai, and we're going to take a look at that as they're running through the far turn. Keep an eye on this red cap down on the inside, blue sleeves, white body. That is Paluska Parfait. And for a moment, keep in mind, this is at Meydan, where you kind of want to be forwardly placed. This is a very slick ride from Jose Ortiz. He's eventually going to weave through traffic. Initially, it looks like he's going to angle to the outside. Gray Magician rolls up on the outside. Instead, Jose's going to split horses right about now. He's going to dive through there into that hole. It's a beautiful ride, and he goes on. And look, the difference between he and Gray Magician didn't get the greatest of rides in a spot like this. I think you should make the argument, and I think you could and should make the argument that Gray Magician ran a better race than Paluska Parfait did. Paluska Parfait got a beautiful ride. But when you look at it from a 1.25 mile standpoint, he looks like the kind of horse that will run all day. So if you get to a scenario, as we've seen year in and year out, where that final quarter mile turns into a staggerfest in the Kentucky Derby, I think you're going to have a horse like this, Paluska Parfait, who will at least be finishing. And when I say finishing, I don't think he's going to be rolling home like a freight train, like his dad, point of entry on grass. But I think you're going to have a horse that's going to stay the distance. Whereas some of these other horses, they're going to be absolutely crying out for mom, saying, no mas, I don't want to go on any farther. I think at that point he could possibly pick up some pieces, and maybe he's that kind of horse that you use underneath, whether it's a trifecta or a superfecta, at a giant price. Because of all the horses that won one of the final big preps, I would be stunned if he is not the largest price. I think you're looking at every bit of 20-1, if not maybe even 30-1. Because just in general, I think we have a negative connotation of the UAE Derby over here because we haven't seen much success come out of that race in the Kentucky Derby. And also because we kind of feel like we know what Paluska Parfait is. And we kind of know what Gray Magician is. That, you know what? They weren't all that over here. They went over there. They took advantage of a soft group. Now they're going to come back and they're going to face the big horses. We'll find out. To me, he is best used underneath. I don't really view him as a legitimate contender or a legitimate threat to win this race. Anything can happen. He's a nice horse and he goes out for great connections. But to me, he's best used underneath. Can't take anything away from him. He's a graded stakes winner. He got the job done over in Dubai. We'll find out now if that translates over here the first Saturday in May for the Kentucky Derby. If I'm using Paluska Parfait, it's going to be underneath, particularly in a superfecta, but I could even use him in the underneath slot in a trifecta. We'll find out how he handles better company here the first Saturday in May. Rounding out the top 5 for this prep season Kentucky Derby point list is Roadster, one of a couple in here, a few in here anyway, for Bob Baffert. Has been ridden by Mike Smith in all 4 of his lifetime starts. That will change the first Saturday in May. Florent Giroux has the mount aboard Roadster for the Kentucky Derby because Mike Smith has opted to ride Omaha Beach. Now, Roadster was a very highly regarded horse as a 2-year-old. He broke his maiden very impressively out at Del Mar with this race right here, earned an 81 buyer by more than 4 lengths, beat a number of nice enough horses. Came back, and the defeat here in the Del Mar Futurity, sure, you see Game Winner in here. You see Row 8, and he's a nice horse as well. The response from Bob Baffert afterward was such disappointment. And it seems odd because he won the race with the eventual 2-year-old champion, Game Winner. But he was so disappointed in the effort from Roadster that, boy, it was difficult for me to get that out of my head. Then you find out that he had a little bit of a procedure, a breathing issue. They take care of that. He comes back in this non-winners of one other than on March the 1st out at Santa Anita. We're going to pick it up as they're rounding the far turn. He's got Nolo Contesto boxed in here, and say what you will about Nolo Contesto, I still maintain he's going to end up being a nice horse. But this was a nice ride from Smith to keep that horse hemmed in there. But this is a very comfortable effort from Roadster, considering this is his first start in about 6 months, 7 months even. Haven't seen him go 2 turns in his career. He's not out of first gear. Smith's just shaking the reins at him, and he goes off, and he wins very, very comfortably. Now, I had concerns about ultimately how far he wanted to go. This race was at a flat mile. How was he going to continue to proceed and stretch out? Well, we found that out here in short order. They come back in the Santa Anita Derby. This was a race that right about this time right here, I'm getting concerned because I don't think this is a blistering pace whatsoever. Instagrand is out here. We all thought he had distance limitations. Nolo Contesto is pushing things. But more importantly, you've got Game Winner out here in the clear. And with Roadster starting to lose ground, I'm thinking, boy, that's going to be a very difficult sort of obstacle for you to overcome. Not only does he lose ground, he starts dropping back considerably here going into the far turn. And it makes me think, okay, well, this is not going to be an ideal situation for the fans of Roadster. I picked him this day. I bet him this day. It's a scenario where you go, okay, well, maybe he's not quite what I thought he was. Until right about now, when he starts to find his stride, and everybody else is all out going for a home, admittedly. But boy, does this horse come with a very eye-catching move. Smith angles him out into the clear, and he just absolutely rolls over the top of this field. And sure, Game Winner digs in, but that's what Game Winner does. He is just stubborn, and he doesn't want to lose. He's a cool, blue-collar, absolute rock-solid racehorse. But Roadster, when I see this, and Smith isn't really getting into Roadster, I don't think he got to the bottom of this horse. There's a part of me that looks at it and says, you know what? You might have something here. Now, the distance, additional 1/8 of a mile on top of this, maybe or maybe it won't work for him. But what he did there, coming from so far off the pace against good horses, it leads me to believe that you're dealing with the goods. Now, the interesting thing to compare for Roadster is the speed figures with the Santa Anita Derby. The 98 buyer puts him right there in the thick of things. The raw 113 Timeform US rating puts him on the slower side as opposed to some of the big horses. Omaha Beach, I believe, earned a 121. You have a horse like Tacitus who's up in the 119 range. Other horses that are in the high 110 range as opposed to Roadster, who to date is on the low 110 side of things. Does not mean that he cannot improve. I look at this horse and say he continues to improve. I think he's only going to get better as more seasoning is involved. And not that he's unprofessional by any stretch, but I just think third start off the bench, you might be looking at his best effort. Now, he's never shipped out of Southern California, something you got to keep in mind. But boy, if you think that, if you want to just excuse the futurity at Del Mar and say he had a breathing problem, what has this horse done wrong? He's shown versatility. He can be forwardly placed. He can come from off of it. If the pace is too hot, he's not one of those horses that's dependent on the lead. I think there's a lot to like about Roadster. Oh, by the way, he's trained by a guy named Baffert. And Baffert knows a thing or two about winning the Kentucky Derby. It'll be very interesting to see how the wagering goes for Roadster. I don't know that he'll be the favorite. He or Tacitus, who's going to be the second choice? Because I think Omaha Beach will be the favorite. I think there's a scenario where Tacitus is second choice, Roadster is third choice, and that 7-1, 8-1 range. If that's the case, I think you can make the argument that that's a very, very square price on a horse that really, to date, has done nothing wrong. Roadster is going to be a fascinating horse to watch as we lead into the Kentucky Derby. 1.25 miles, who knows? But boy, what he's done so far, I think he's been very impressive to date. There we go, the first part of 4. Let's call this a 4-part pod looking at the top 20 of the Kentucky Derby, the horses that are scheduled to be in the starting gate the first Saturday in May, 1 through 5 in the books. Questions, comments, concerns, you can leave them beneath the video player on YouTube or on Twitter directly to me at Bernier_Matt. I believe these are also going to be chopped up into individual contender profiles. So you may find these, again, if you want to just look for Roadster or you just want to look for Vakama. Those will probably be up in time, and you'll just have just that little snippet there. But if you want the whole first part of the 4, you know where to find it. You can find it on YouTube, SoundCloud, iTunes, video.drf.com, as well as Spotify. I'll be back on Monday recording the second piece of this 4-part pod. It would typically be the recap edition. It will not be the recap edition this coming Monday. So with all due respect to the races that are going to be run this weekend, especially the Charlestown Classic, right now everybody's got Derby on mind. So we'll go through horses 6 through 10 on Monday's pod. That'll be the second part of this 4-parter. So until I come back on Monday and we go over those horses, good luck this weekend. Best of luck however you play, whatever you play, wherever you play. This has been the preview edition, or the first part of the top 20 for the Kentucky Derby on the Matt Bernier Show.